Hello everyone and welcome to another part of the Galaga SDL tutorial videos. And in this video we are going to be starting on the play screen. So we stopped on the last video where we had our way of switching between the start screen and the play screen. And if you press escape in the play screen, you go back to the start screen. So the first thing that we're going to do is create the class for our play screen. For that we will add a new item. And we will call this one PlayScreen. And in here we will do if not defined underscore PlayScreen underscore h define underscore PlayScreen underscore h and if. And we will need to include a few things. The first one will be our input manager, the background stars, and this should be it for now. So include input manager, include input manager.h, and include background stars.h. And then we can create our class. So class play screen. And this will inherit from our game object class, our game entity class. And then we will create our private variables. The first one being our timer. So timer pointer and timer. And next up we will need an input manager pointer. So input manager pointer input. And a background stars pointer, and we will call this one stars. Now to move on to the public functions, it will just be pretty straightforward: constructor, destructor, update, and render. So public play screen and play screen destructor, void update, and void render. Now that we have this set up, we can go ahead and start implementing those in our CPP. So in Galaga, and the Galaga filter will do a new item .cpp, and we'll call this one play screen and include our play screen.h. So let's start with our constructor. We will initialize our timer and input manager variables. These are singletons, so we'll just use instance. So timer equals timer instance. And our input is going to be equal to input manager instance. And then our stars, we will do stars equals background stars instance as well. Now in our destructor, we'll set all these to null. So play screen destructor. Our timer is going to be equal to null. Our input is going to be equal to null. And stars is going to be equal to null. Now our void play screen update and void play screen render. Okay, now that we have everything set up, we can make an instance of this class in our screen manager. So if we go back to screen manager.h, we can include our play screen.h. And then right here under start screen, we'll do a play screen pointer. We'll call this one play screen. And then in the screen manager.cpp, we will do play screen is going to be equal to a new play screen. Then we will delete the play screen in the destructor. So delete play screen. Play screen is going to be equal to null. Then for our update, we will do the update in the case of play. So play screen update. And then for our render, we will add a new case for play and render our play screen. So case play break and then in here we'll do PlayScreen render. And this should be our setup for now for the PlayScreen. Now if we run it, everything should look the same because we didn't add any extra items. We just have the PlayScreen added in now. So there we go, and this should be our PlayScreen. So in Galaga, the PlayScreen has a sidebar right here. And for most of the functionality of our PlayScreen, what we're going to do is create a few modules and then make instances of these modules and add them into our PlayScreen. This way, we won't clutter up the PlayScreen with the player behaviors and the sidebar information updating and everything else. And so the first thing that we're going to do now is create our sidebar and with a background and then the scores for the high score and the play score. So now if we go here, we can create our new class, and for this one we will call it play sidebar. So a .h, and we'll call this one play sidebar. This one we'll do an if not defined underscore play sidebar underscore h define underscore play sidebar underscore h, and if our sidebar will need a timer, so include timer.h. We will also include scoreboard.h for our scores, and finally we will include the audio manager.h. So for our class, we will call this one play sidebar, and this will inherit from game entity, so public game entity. Now in here we will do a private set of variables, first one being mtimer. So this will be a timer pointer and call it mtimer. Then next up is the audio manager pointer, and we'll call this one maudio. Okay, so we will first start off by having our background. So we'll do a texture pointer and we'll call this one mBackground. And we will add our update and function, update and render functions, as well as our constructor and destructor for this class. So public play sidebar and destructor play sidebar void update and void render. Okay, and that should be it for these. Now we can create our CPP for this class. So we will go to our source files, add new, and then for the CPP we will do play sidebar, and then include play sidebar.h. So play sidebar, and then we will create the destructor as well. There it is. And then void play sidebar update and void play sidebar render. Okay, so for the timer and the audio manager, these are singletons, so we can initialize those here. And timer equals timer instance, and audio manager is going to be, or maudio is going to be our audio manager instance. And then in our destructor we will set mtimer to null and our maudio to null. Okay, now the last thing that we need to initialize is this background. So for the background, what we have here is, let's see here, I have a 100 by 100 texture. It's just a black texture, and that's what I'm gonna use for the background for the sidebar. So I will say that over here, I will say that m background is going to be equal to a new texture, and this will take this is called black.png, so black.png, and then over here I will delete it, so delete m background, and then m background is going to be equal to null, and then in render I will say that I want to render the background, so background render. And now that I'm creating it, deleting it, and rendering it, I can test it out and see if it works or not. So now that we created our sidebar, we can make an instance of it in our play screen. So over here, I can do, let's see, down here, I probably need to include that file. So include playsidebar.h and playsidebar pointer m sidebar. And then in the PlayScreen.cpp, I'll say that m sidebar is going to be equal to a new play sidebar. Then in the destructor, I will delete m sidebar. M sidebar is equal to null. I will update the sidebar, so m sidebar update. And I will also render it, so m sidebar render. And now we should have a black box where the sidebar is, but we need to attach the background to be a child of the sidebar so that we can move the sidebar around and the background would move with it. So m background parent is going to be equal to this, and then m background position is going to be vector2 0, and that should center it on where our sidebar is. Now if we run it, we should have a black box in the middle where our sidebar is. So now if we wait here, and the black box is probably somewhere here because I didn't set the position of the sidebar. So what I can do now is go back to the play screen, and the sidebar, I can make it a child of the play screen. So m sidebar parent is going to be this, and m sidebar position, and let's say we want to center it on the screen for now. So that will be graphics. Now, oh, that will be a vector2, and that will take graphics instance screen width multiplied by 0.5f, and the same thing for the y except with height instead. So graphics instance screen height multiplied by 0.5f, and that should center our sidebar in the middle of the screen. Now if we try to run it, so it should be somewhere right here, but since our background is black as well, it's kind of hard to see. So for now, let's go to our graphics.cpp and change the SDL set render draw color to be white. So that would be 0x, FF, FF, and FF. And that should give us a white background for our game so that we can see the black box. There we go. So now that we have this, we can stretch it out to be to cover the entire area of the screen. So we will do that later after we set up all our variables for the score and the player. So now that we have this, we can go ahead and get started on the labels for the high score and the labels for the player. For this, we will go back to our sidebar.h, and underneath m background, we will start off with a texture pointer and call this one m high label, and a texture pointer and call this one m score label. And this is because in the play screen of the game, it has high and then score underneath it. So it can't be made out of a single texture. So we'll have two textures, one for high and one for score. Now that we have these two, we can go to our constructor of the sidebar and initialize these variables. So m high label is going to be equal to a new texture. And this texture will take in a string high. Our font will be our mu logic.ttf, and that's the font we used in the start screen as well. The size will be 32, and the color will be 150, 0, and 0. So just to keep it consistent with the colors that we used and the size of text we used in the start screen. Now high label parent is going to be equal to this, and high label position is going to be vector2 0. Now that we created something, we need to delete it. So delete high label. High label is equal to null. And then for the render, we will do high label render. Okay, so now we can go ahead and test it out and see what it looks like. There we go. So this one says hi. Now we can set up the score one. So score label is going to be equal to a new texture. This one will be score. Our font is the same, so mulogic.ttf. 32 for the size, and the color 150, 0, and 0. Score label parent is this, and score label. Now the position, on the other hand, will still be 0 on X, but we want to move it down. And since the size of the text is 32, we will move it down by 32 so that it lines up, so it would be right underneath the high text. So vector2, and the X will be 0.0f, the Y will be 32.0f, and then we will delete that. So delete score label. Score label is equal to null. There we go. And then for render, we will say score label render. And yeah, that should be it for now. Let's see what it looks like. And we have high and score. Now, for in the game, it had high on the left on the left side a bit, and score on the right side a little bit as well. So we will move these around by changing their position. So this one will be a vector2 instead. So for the high label, we'll change the vector 0 to vector2 of. So our Y will be 0, which is fine. Our X, let's move it back to, let's say, negative 20.0f, but the Y will stay 0.0f. And then if we run that, now high should be a little bit to the right, or to the left, I mean, so that's fine. Now we need to move score to the right. And for that, we will change this to, let's say, 20. So now score is at 20 and 32. Now if we go here, okay, so high probably needs to move to the left a little bit more. So we will move it to negative 30 instead. So we have this at negative 30 and 0, and this one at 20 and 32. Now if we run it again, there we go. So that looks pretty good. Now we can add our score at the bottom. So first, now that we have our labels set up here, we can move it so that these are on the top right corner. And to do this, all we need to do is to just go to the play screen and change our sidebar position, since everything is parented to it and everything else will move with it. So let's say we can move it to, so screen width multiplied by 85%. So that should move it to the right. That looks fine. And then we need to move it up. And let's say, so the screen height multiplied by 1.0f. And that should put our score over here. Okay, so that looks fine. Now we need to move the black box down a bit and then stretch it so that it covers the entire side of the screen, the entire right side of the screen. So now we can go to our play sidebar, and over here for the position of the background, we want to center it instead. So instead of this, we will do a vector 2, and the position for this will be 20.0f on the x and 380.0f on the y. And that should put it somewhere in the middle. There we go. So we moved the background down and to the right a little bit, and we just need to stretch it. And for that, we can use the scaling. So m background, the scale is going to be equal to a vector 2. And let's say we want to scale it a little bit on the x, but then a lot on the y. For that, we will do something like 3.0 f on the x, and let's say 10.0 f on the y. And hopefully this covers the entire side of the entire right side of the screen. Okay, so this looks pretty good, but it seems like it's a little bit too far to the left, so we'll just move it to the right. For that, we'll change the position, so let's put it at, let's say, 30. That's still quite a bit to the left, so we'll change it to 20 instead. In background position, so it's 20. That's still a bit too actually changing it to 20 would move it to the left. Never mind, we need to raise it, so it would be something like 40, let's say. Not sure why I was thinking that changing it would make it move to the right, or lowering it would make it move to the right. Okay, so that's 20, maybe a little bit more, so let's make it 45, let's say. Okay, so that looks pretty good. The only thing is high score is a little bit too low actually, so we need to move it up a bit. So for that, we will go back to the play screen, and instead of 0.1, we'll do something like 0.05, let's say. Okay, so this looks pretty good. We now have our high score. Now we can add the actual high score underneath these two. So to do that, we will create our variable for our scoreboard. So in our sidebar, the play sidebar.h, we will do a scoreboard pointer and call this one m high scoreboard, m high scoreboard. And for this one, we will go to the play sidebar.cpp, and m high scoreboard is going to be equal to a new scoreboard. M high scoreboard parent is going to be equal to this, and m high scoreboard position. Now the position for the scoreboard, we have this at 0 and this is 32, so we need to move another 32 down, so the y is going to be 64. So let's say vector 2 of 0.0f and 64.0f. Now that we created it, we need to delete it, so m high scoreboard, or delete m high scoreboard, then m high scoreboard is equal to null, and in the render we will do m high scoreboard render. There we go. Now let's go back and see what that looks like. There we go. So we just need to move this to the right side of the screen so that it's right under here, under the R and E. For that, we will move the X a bit. So let's say somewhere like 80. And that looks fine. Maybe a little bit more to the right, so let's say 85. Okay, so that looks fine. Now what we can do, actually, maybe we can move the whole thing to the right a little bit more. So let's go back to the play screen. Instead of 85% on the X, let's say 87, for example. That seems a bit too thin. Okay, let's keep it at 85 and then just move the high and score variables a little bit to the right. So we have our high label. So this is at -30. Let's make it at like -25. And at 20, this will be 25. And this is at 85. Let's make it something like 90. So move everything to the right by 5 pixels. Okay, so I'm fine with that. All right, so now that we have our high score, we can go ahead and have a function so that it can be accessed from our play screen to set the high score of our sidebar. So in sidebar, inside the public area for the functions, we will do a void set high score, and this will take in an int score. Now in the play sidebar.cpp, we can do void play sidebar set high score int score, and our high scoreboard score is going to be equal to the score that we're passing in. And that should let this functionality be accessed through the play screen only through this function right here, so that this whole sidebar will be, so it would just be enclosed on everything that's inside it. All the functions that it has to handle, it just handles within itself. So in the play screen now, after we create it, we can tell it sidebar set our high score to, let's say, 30,000. And once we do that and run it, the sidebar's high score should be set at 30,000. There we go. Now, if we start saving the high score and the player has a much higher score, we can save that into a file. And when it's created by the play screen, it would set the high score to whatever value that we have saved. Okay, so now moving on to the player score. Now for the player, we need to have it roughly the same idea as the high score. So we will have a texture pointer, and this one we'll call mplayer1 label, and this will just say 1 UP. So let's go ahead and set that up. So mplayer1 label is equal to a new texture. This one will be 1 UP. The font will be mulogic.ttf, 32 and 150, 0 and 0. Now for the parent, mplayer1 label, parent is this, and mplayer1 label position. So this is at 64, so we can move it down a little bit. So let's say down by another 32, so that would be somewhere around 96. So let's set it at vector2, 0.0f and 96.0f. Now that we created it, we need to delete it. mplayer1 label, or delete mplayer1 label. mplayer1 label is equal to null. And then mplayer1 label render. And there we go. Now let's see. Now we have it here. We need to move it to the left so that it lines up with high, and then move it down a bit. So to move it to the left, we'll move it back to, let's say, -30. And let's see where that ends up. That's still a bit to the right, so let's say -40. A little bit more, so -45. That should do it. Okay, so that looks fine. this white background is really bright. But since we know that the background is working fine, our black background, we can go back to graphics.cpp and in the SDL set render draw color. That's, by the way, inside the init function. We can set this back to 0, 0, 0, 0, and 0, 0. Now if we run it, we should have our black background back, and we shouldn't have any stars behind this. Now we just need to move 1 UP down a bit. And for that, let's move it down to, let's say, instead of 96, we'll say 160. Okay, so that looks fine. But when the level starts, 1 UP should be flashing on and off. And to do this, we will have a blink timer and a blink interval for it to be on screen and disappear. So in here, we will have a float m blink timer and a float m blink interval. And then a boolean m player1 label visible. Now here we can say that m blink timer is going to start off being 0.0f. Our blink interval, let's say, is something like 0.5f, so every half second it blinks. And our m player1 label visible is going to start off being true. Now in our update, we can increment our blink timer. So m blink timer plus equals, blink timer plus equals our m timer delta time. And then if m blink timer is more than or equal to the blink interval, we just want to flip our boolean that we have right here. So m player1 label visible equals not m player1 label visible, and then reset our blink timer. So our m blink timer is going to equal to 0.0f. Now that this is done, we can render player1 label only whenever the player1 label visible is true. So we can say if m player1 label visible, do the rendering, and that should add the blinking for the 1 UP. There we go. So the only thing left for this video is to just add the player's score. So for that, we will just have another scoreboard. That should be pretty straightforward. So scoreboard pointer m player1 score, and for that we will do m player1 score is equal to a new scoreboard m player1 score parent is going to be equal to this, and m player1 score position is going to be pretty much where this is, but we want it to line up with the high score. So the x would be 90, but the y would be whatever 1 UP is plus 32. So it would be a vector 2 of 90.0f, and for the y it would be 160 plus 32, so 192.0f. Now down here we can delete that, so m player1 score, or delete m player1 score, and then m player1 score equals null. And then down here we will do a render for it. So m player1 score render. And now we have the scores set up. Let's see what they look like. There we go. So that looks pretty good. We just have to have now a function so that we can set this score. And for that, we will go down here and create another function. So void set score int score, or set player score. For the 2-player, we will come back to it later. For now, we will set it as being a 1-player score setting, and then we'll add functionality later on once we have the 2-player mode working. So set player score, and it takes in a score. So let's implement that. Void play sidebar set player score and score, and we'll say that our M player 1 score is going to be, its score will be equal to our score. And with that, we can say that in our PlayScreen.cpp, M sidebar set player score to, let's say, something like 50,000. Let's run it. Okay, so this seems to be working well. The functionality to figure out what the high score is and what the player score is and all that will be handled inside the play screen, not inside the sidebar itself. Because we might have multiple players, and setting the high score for that will be a nightmare to just coordinate because the sidebar doesn't have access to a lot of this information. So this seems to be working fine now, and this should pretty much be it for this part of the video. In the next videos, we're going to be adding the player lives and the level flags. So, and this is why we have the audio manager here, because of the ticks whenever a flag is added. But for this video, this should be it. If this video helped, please let me know. If you have any suggestions, questions, or feedback, please leave them below. Otherwise, thank you very much for watching, and I will see you in the next video.